The rain fell on the city in a soft, persistent whisper, greasing the dark streets and turning the neon signs into smeared watercolors of light. In a quiet corner of a forgotten park, beneath the skeletal branches of an old oak tree, a man known only as Ghoost watched the world from a place of permanent shadow. He was a creature of silence and necessity, a man whose life was a series of transactions conducted in the dark. He felt nothing, or so he told himself, until the night he saw Laura. She was running through the rain, laughing, not with the desperate hurry of someone caught in a storm, but with the pure, unreserved joy of someone who loved the feel of it on her skin. Her hair, dark as the wet asphalt, was plastered to her forehead, and her dress, a simple thing of pale blue, was soaked through. She stopped just under the edge of a street lamp, its glow haloing her as she closed her eyes and tilted her face to the sky, a smile playing on her lips. Ghoost, standing perfectly still in the deeper darkness, felt a crack form in the ice around his heart. It was not a dramatic shatter, but a faint, insistent fracture. He had seen beauty before, but never beauty so utterly unaware of its own power. She was light incarnate, and he was the darkness that clung to the edges. He knew he should turn away, melt back into the alleyways that birthed him. But his feet, for the first time in memory, refused to move. Weeks passed. He found himself drawn to her world, a world of sunlit cafes and bustling bookshops, a world of color and sound. He watched her from a distance, learning her routines. She was a painter, he discovered, her fingers often stained with smudges of cobalt or ochre. She would sit for hours in the same park, sketching the trees and the children, her face a canvas of concentration and quiet contentment. One afternoon, a sudden, aggressive wind snatched the pages of her sketchbook, sending them dancing wildly across the grass. She gave a cry of dismay, chasing after them. Ghoost, without a thought, moved. It was what he did best: move unseen, intercept trajectories. He caught 3 sheets against a bench, his hands swift and sure. He gathered 2 more from where they tangled in a bush. He approached her slowly, holding the papers out. She stood breathless, her eyes wide with surprise and gratitude. As she took them, their fingers brushed. A current, simple and devastating, passed between them. "Thank you," she said, her voice warmer than any sun he could remember. "You saved my morning's work." He merely nodded, unable to trust his own voice. He expected her to turn away, but she did not. She looked at him, really looked, and in her hazel eyes, he saw no fear, no judgment, only a gentle curiosity. "I've seen you here before," she said softly. "You're always in the shadows, watching the light." The truth of it, spoken so plainly, stunned him. She saw him. Not the myth, not the phantom, but the man hiding within. "The light is new to me," he managed to say, the words rough from disuse. Her smile returned, a little softer now. "Well," she said, glancing at the sky as the clouds finally parted, "it's everywhere today. Maybe you should get used to it." She turned to go, then paused. "I'm Laura." He knew. Oh, how he knew. And in that moment, standing in the newborn sunlight, he dared to speak a name he had not used in years, a piece of his soul offered in return for her smile. "I'm Alex." He watched her walk away, the stolen sketches pressed to her chest. The crack in the ice widened, and for the first time, a fragile, terrifying warmth began to seep into the cold chambers of his heart. He did not know it then, but the chase was over. The ghost had been seen, and in being seen, he had begun to live again. The name Alex hung in the air between them, a fragile bridge built over a chasm. For Laura, it was a beginning. For Ghoost, it was a surrender. In the days that followed, he found himself crossing that bridge, tentatively at first, drawn by a force stronger than any instinct for self-preservation. He would appear at the park when she sketched, never presuming, always maintaining a careful distance. She would smile, pat the space on the bench beside her, and he would sit, a statue of coiled stillness amidst her vibrant chaos of pencils and pastels. She talked. She talked about the way the light changed the color of the brick buildings in the afternoon, about the stubborn old dog that visited the fountain, about her dreams of a studio flooded with northern light. He listened, a skill honed in silence, but now it was different. He wasn't gathering information, he was drinking in her soul. "You see so much," he said one afternoon, watching her deft hands shade the curve of a pigeon's wing. She glanced at him, her eyes thoughtful. "I try to see what's really there. Not just the shape, but the life inside it." She turned her gaze fully on him, and he felt seen in that profound, unsettling way again. "You do that, too. But I think you're watching for different reasons." He looked away, the old caution rising like a tide. "My reasons are not for this sunlight." "Then we'll sit in the shade," she said simply, as if it solved everything. And to his amazement, it did. She accepted his shadows. She didn't pry into the darkness, she merely allowed it to exist beside her light. She asked for no history, demanded no promises. Her trust was a quiet, unwavering thing, offered without condition, and it dismantled him more completely than any interrogation ever could. He began to speak, in fragments. Not about the violence or the cold transactions, but about the feeling of rain on his skin as a child, about the taste of a specific, forgotten candy, about the loneliness of watching seasons change from the inside of a car. These shards of a past life, polished by her attention, became their own kind of mosaic. One evening, walking her to the door of her apartment building, a ritual that had become sacred to him, a man emerged from the lobby, his face hardened by street life. His eyes flickered to Ghoost, and a flicker of recognition, of warning, passed between them. The man gave an almost imperceptible nod and moved on. Laura saw the silent exchange. Inside the foyer, she turned to him. The easy warmth in her eyes was tempered with concern. "You're not just Alex, are you?" His heart, that newly awakened, fragile thing, hammered against his ribs. This was the moment. The moment the ghost would dissolve in the light, leaving only a frightening truth. He met her gaze, his own full of a storm of warnings. "No," he whispered, the word a confession. "I'm not." She reached out, not in fear, but in tenderness, her palm resting against his cheek. Her touch was an anchor in the sudden tempest of his dread. "The man I have coffee with, who listens to me ramble about paint viscosity, who smiles just with his eyes, that's Alex to me." Her thumb brushed his skin. "The rest, it's part of your landscape. But it's not the life inside." In that moment, standing under the harsh fluorescent light of the lobby, Ghoost felt the last of his defenses crumble. She had seen the monster in the shadows and had named it merely a part of the scenery. She loved the man within. He leaned into her touch, closing his eyes, and for the first time, he believed that a ghost could be loved. And in that belief, a new, terrifying hope was born. Hope, Ghoost discovered, was a more demanding master than fear. Fear asked only for survival, for retreat into familiar shadows. Hope asked for construction. It demanded he build something real upon the fragile foundation Laura had offered. The ghost began, painstakingly, to learn how to be a man. He found a small, sunlit apartment, not in the city's forgotten corners, but in a building with chipping paint and noisy neighbors. He bought a bed, a table, 2 chairs. The emptiness of the space terrified him until Laura walked in, her arms full of wildflowers in a mason jar. "Every home needs something alive," she said, and the rooms seemed to breathe. He got a job. Not the kind that paid in thick envelopes of cash, but one that left a faint, honest ache in his muscles by evening. He worked in a warehouse, loading trucks. The foreman called him by the name on his new, painstakingly acquired documents, Alex. His coworkers were rough, simple men who talked of football and family. He listened, and once he laughed at a joke. The sound was foreign in his own throat, but it felt warm. His nights, once spent in silent vigilance or colder purpose, were now spent with her. They cooked simple meals in her kitchen, her fingers often leaving smudges of paint on the utensils. He learned the names of colors from her, not just red, but crimson, vermilion, madder lake. She taught him to see the world not as a series of threats and exits, but as a composition of light and texture. One night, as a gentle rain tapped against her window, she was sketching him. He sat unnaturally still, uncomfortable under such direct, artistic scrutiny. "Relax," she murmured, her pencil whispering across the paper. "I'm not capturing your face. I'm capturing the quiet." "What quiet?" he asked, his voice low. "The quiet you carry now. It's different. Before, it was the quiet of a winter forest, empty and waiting. Now," she looked up, her eyes soft. "Now it's the quiet of a deep lake. Still, but full of life underneath." He crossed the room, drawn to her as always. He looked over her shoulder at the sketch. It wasn't a photographic likeness. The lines were softer, the shadows less severe. She had drawn the man she saw, the man he was trying so hard to become. In her art, he looked peaceful. He turned her gently to face him, cupping her face in his hands, hands that had known only violence and survival, now learning the cartography of her skin. He kissed her, and it was not the desperate clutch of a ghost seeking warmth, but the deliberate, grateful kiss of a man who has found his way home. In that kiss, he offered her every unspoken promise, every hope for a future he once thought was a curse to dream of. Later, as they lay tangled in her sheets, the rain a steady rhythm on the glass, she placed a hand on his bare chest, over the scarred, beating heart beneath. "Stay," she whispered into the darkness, a question and a command. "I have nowhere else to go," he answered, and it was the truest statement of his life. The ghost was gone. In this room, in this life they were building piece by careful piece, only Alex remained. And for the first time, that was enough. The ghost was not just gone, he was buried under layers of a life so beautifully ordinary it felt sacred. Mornings were no longer a silent assessment of threats, but the gentle chaos of Laura, bleary-eyed and searching for a clean brush, her hair a dark swirl against the pillow. Alex would make coffee, the smell mingling with the scent of turpentine and the toast he'd often burn. They learned each other's rhythms, the quiet symphony of a shared existence. The job at the warehouse remained. The work was hard, the pay modest, but every sore muscle was a testament to an honest day. He came home with dirt under his nails and a fatigue that felt clean. Laura would greet him at the door of their now shared apartment, her own hands often stained with paint, and she would kiss him, tasting of tea and determination. They were two artists, he thought, she painting her canvases, he painting over the darkness of his past with the broad, careful strokes of a normal life. Their love was not a constant, dramatic fire, but a steady, banked hearth. It was in the way she always saved the last bite of dessert for him, the way he instinctively warmed her cold feet with his own under the blankets, the silent communication of a glance across a crowded room. He learned to smile with his whole face, the expression no longer feeling like a crack in a mask, but a natural response to the joy she emanated. Then, one crisp autumn evening, she placed his hand on her stomach. They were on their worn sofa, the sky outside a deep violet. She didn't speak. She simply looked at him, her eyes pools of quiet, awestruck terror and a happiness so profound it stole his breath. He felt the impossible truth beneath his palm, the faint, firm curve that was not just her, but them. A future, made flesh. He said nothing. Words had always been his enemies, inadequate vessels for the storm inside him. Instead, he pulled her into his arms, burying his face in the scent of her hair, paint and jasmine and home. A tremor ran through him, a seismic shift. It was not fear, though fear was there, a sharp, familiar ghost at the periphery. It was a ferocity, a vast and terrifying love that rewired his very soul. This was no longer just about building a life for himself and the woman he loved. It was about becoming a fortress, a sanctuary, a man worthy of the title father. He spent the following months in a state of quiet, focused wonder. He read books, assembled a crib with intense, comical concentration, and practiced swaddling a teddy bear. He watched Laura's body change, awed by her strength, humbled by the life blooming within her. The last shadows of his old self seemed to recede, not in a battle, but in irrelevance. They had no place here, in this sunlit world of prenatal appointments and color swatches for the nursery. The night their daughter was born, Alex held Laura's hand, his anchor through the storm of her labor. When the first, indignant cry pierced the air, a sound of pure, vibrant life, he wept. He wept for the ghost he had been, for the man he had become, and for the tiny, perfect creature placed in his trembling arms. Her eyes, deep and wise, blinked up at him. In them, he saw Laura's light, and perhaps, a reflection of his own hard-won peace. He was not a ghost. He was a father. The story he had never dared to imagine was now, miraculously, his to tell.